What's up YouTube and welcome to this React tutorial. So the topic is class components in React. So this is the second type of components that we will gonna talk about, and by using this class component we can build more complex components with more functions, and we can also define states. So they are generally more powerful than functional components. So let us see how they works by making a to-do list with a class component. We can also make this app component as a class component, but it will do us no good as we are using only this app as a entry point to our application. So let us build another folder in the src components, and inside this folder another folder to do, and this to do folder will contain index.js and index.css. Now to make a class component, we have to first import React from React, and we will say export this class to do, which is the name of the component, and extend react.component. So the basic definition of a React component. This is how a class component is made. So the way the class component work is this. We have some functions which are called React Lifecycle methods. So the first one is constructor, which is also the first one to run. It takes props as an argument. So whatever the properties you want to pass to this component. And inside this constructor, I will use a function super and pass in the props. So what this super props does is it makes the props means the properties available across the whole component. So it is necessary to use super props. Then we have this dot state. So this is where you define state variables or state data. So the only data that I need to worry about is list of tasks, which is gonna be equals to this dot props dot default task. So the default task assigned to the to-do list. After this we have a method render, which renders whatever the HTML output that we want to show on the screen. So it runs after the constructor. So first I want a h3 heading. This is our to-do list. After this, so there will be a unordered list and a input with a width of 120 pixels and a button saying that add task. And I will create another function which does not have to do anything with the life cycle, just an ordinary function to render the task. It will return this dot state dot list of task, and there is a function map which will take an arrow function with an argument of data and index, and what it will do is it will map each of the element inside the array into a list item, which will have the data inside it and a unique key which is gonna be the index of the item, and the list item will also contain a button. So a button to remove that task, which will have a border of 0 pixels and background color transparent. The ID of list lid l plus the index, and let's say button ID will contain a b plus index. So the ID is lid and the button ID. So it will map all of the tasks inside my list of task array, and this will get the list of tasks by splitting the task with commas. And this map method also expects a return. So we are returning the structure of this li element to this map function, and this map function will map all the elements inside the list of task array and convert them into respective li element, and then return them wherever the render task is called. So the render task should be called inside the UL. So we will say this dot render the task, and this render also expects a return statement. So this all should be under this return statement. Now let us use this to-do list. Import to do and then use it here, and let's pass the default tasks. So now let us see how our to-do list looks like. So this is our to-do list, but this should have our default tasks. Actually, I didn't call this function, I wanted to call this function. So now when I save this, so all of my tasks are here. But there is one problem, that if I don't give these default tasks and save, this will render the page blank. This is because it's saying that cannot read the property of split. So the split is causing the problem because we are not defining the default task and it is considered as null. So this was the problem, and we can fix this in our next method, which is the componentdidmount. So this is the function which is executed when the render is completed. So the constructor is called first, then the render method renders all the HTML, then after completing the render method once, the componentdidmount gets executed. So inside here I can say that this would be initially empty, so an empty array. And now we don't actually have to pass the props because we only pass props to the super when we have to use the properties inside the constructor. Otherwise the properties will be available across all the class, so we don't have to worry about that. So inside our componentdidmount, let's create a variable. So default tasks. Now for this if condition, I will create a custom function to check if a string is null or white spaces, and it will take an argument of value, and it will return replace all the spaces with empty string dot length. This is my ninja technique of detecting the white spaces. So if we remove all the spaces and the length is less than 1, then the value is considered only white spaces. So I will use this function here, and I have to give it a reference this, and to change a state we use this dot set state. We do not change the this dot state directly because a lot of things in the React are working asynchronously, so it disturbs the flow of React, and that's why whenever we have to change the value of a variable inside this dot state, we use this dot set state. So inside this, an object containing list of tasks with its new value, which is gonna be defs dot split. So split the task whenever you see the comma. So let's pass the defs here, and this condition will work in the reverse. So if the def is not null or empty, then assign the task to the list of tasks. So you can see that the empty list is here, and if I assign the task T1, T2, then you can see that the tasks are here. Now let me put the functions aside from the lifecycle methods in one place, and the lifecycle method according to the order they are executed. So first the constructor method, then the render is executed. After the component is rendered once, the componentdidmount method gets executed. So these are our custom functions. And now, so whenever the add task button get pressed, a function add task will be executed, and it will get the input. Let's give it an ID of, let's say val for now, and let value equals to document get element by ID, or let's say input. And then we will check that if the input is null or empty, then return. So we will not add the task if the input is null or white spaces. Otherwise, this dot set state, and this time I'm gonna give it a arrow function, and it will take a previous state and props as the argument. This way of setting the state is also defined within the React document. I'm not doing this on my own. Inside this, list of tasks will be assigned with the previous state, so the input value. And you can see that we didn't use the props, so we can remove this props. So this add task will add the input value into this array, so a new element will be added to this array, and then the React DOM will detect the change, and it will run the render method again. So this is React's ability that it notices the change and then change its content accordingly. So we have already mapped the list item, but whenever the array value changes, it will update the list element according to the elements inside the list of tasks. So it detects the change and only changes the things that are needed to change, and it does that without refreshing the whole page or without even refreshing the whole unordered list. So it will only add or delete the list items that are necessary for the change to work. Now this add task is actually an event, so we have to bind it in the constructor. And the way we do it in React is we will create a variable, so with the same name, this dot add task, and assign it the event that is binded. This dot add task dot bind, and this looks confusing, but this is the way to bind the event that we will use anywhere in the class. So this is because how the JavaScript this keyword works. So this is the way we bind the events in the React, and we can use them like there is this button on click this dot add task. So just like that. This is an event. This is why we don't have to specify these brackets, because these brackets means we are calling the function, but this event does not needs calling. Looks like I made a mistake over here. Dot list of tasks, and this should work now. So new tasks are adding, and you can see that if I try to add an empty space, it will not work. No matter how many spaces, an empty task won't work. Now for the remove task, I need to create another event, remove task, and I will bind this function as well. And I will use this function in the cross button. So here in the list items, whenever cross button clicks, this dot remove task will run. But how it will know that what items to remove? That's why we added these IDs. So we will know that which index to remove. Now coming into this remove task, I will add event, and JavaScript just works like that. So just adding this event will catch the event for me, and I can get the ID of the button that is pressed. So now I need to get the index from the ID. So id dot substring from 1 to id dot length. So the first character would be B. So I don't want that B. That's why I'm using this substring method, and then convert this ID to number. Now I need to define a temporary array. So just name it array, and it will have the state dot list of tasks. And this is because I want to change this array with a function which is array dot splice, and I want to remove the index. So the element at this index, and I want to remove only one element. So this is the number of element that the splice removes. But the question arises that why I am saving this list of tasks inside a variable. This is because I cannot use array methods directly in a variable inside the state. So I cannot use splice on this list of tasks, because it disturbs the React flow. As I said that we can only change this dot state using this dot set state, and we cannot use this array dot splice function to get our new array, because the way the array dot splice works is that if we have 10 tasks and we remove task number 5, then array dot splice will return just the task 5 and not the entire array. So what I'm doing is I'm saving it inside a temporary array, removing the unnecessary unneeded task, and then reassigning it using the standard this dot set state. List of tasks will get the new array. Now I have already assigned this remove task to the cross button, to all the cross buttons. Now let us check this out. T33 or whatever, 44, 55, 44. Now I will remove task 2. So it is removed. 55, 33. I can show you the componentdidupdate method. And we are calling these methods, these functions as methods because we are defining these functions in a class. That's why they are called methods. Make this value empty. So I could have done it anywhere, but this is to show you how componentdidupdate automatically runs after each update. So whenever the data is changed, it gets updated. So task 3, add task, and the input is empty. So this is how the React works. So this is all for the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel. See you next time.